The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Want to shake up your small business marketing? I mean, really shake it up.
Studio 21 Podcast Cafe.
Have you been thinking about doing your own podcast?
Studio 21 Podcast Cafe.
Would you like to take your business to the next level?
Studio 21 Podcast Cafe.
This is the golden age of podcasting, and it's time to stop thinking and start doing.
Studio 21 Podcast Cafe.
Get your message heard 24/7, 365, over and over again.
Studio 21 Podcast Cafe.
Welcome to the 21st century.
Welcome to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe.
Here's the creator and host of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, David Garofalo.
Hello again. Welcome to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is a 21-minute or less weekly podcast to help you get your message out, grow your business, and build your bottom line. Let me help you bring your marketing and advertising into the 21st century. My name is David Garofalo. I've been doing podcasting since 2010 and created a six-figure income from my podcast alone. This is a 21-minute podcast, so let's start the clock, and here we go. Today's subject is going to be podcasting SEO. That's search engine optimization. I know you've heard the term, but do you really know what that is? Search engine optimization. First off, let's look at what a search engine is and how they work. A search engine is a software system that has been designed to search for information on the World Wide Web, the WWW, right? Search engine results are presented in a line of results, often referred to as search engine results pages. This is when you see SERPs, SERPs, right? The information may be a mix of web pages, images, audio and video files, and other type of files, depending on what search engine you're looking at. There are a lot of them. The one that might come to mind for you right off the bat is the number one, Google, but there's a lot of them out there. Some search engines also mine data, meaning statistics, stats, like who is going there and why are they going there, what is causing them to show up there at the top. Unlike web directories, which are maintained only by human editors, search engines are maintained real-time information by running what they call algorithms, computer calculations on a web crawler, also known as spiders, for up-to-date data. Internet content is not capable of being searched by a web search engine is generally described as the deep web, if you've heard of that. Or in cases like bad marketers and promoters, it is not optimized. Nobody can find you. You need to optimize the ability for the listener to be able to find you, to get heard, and to get ahead of your competitors on search engines. You need to optimize for success. So let's get started with speed. How fast is your website where you are hosting your podcast? It really matters. Where your podcast plays from. Google, for one, cares about your listeners' experience. That's their job, bringing searchers to a relevant place where they can get what they are searching for and have a good experience doing it. That's the job of Google. If your site is slower than your competitors, you will be penalized for penalizing your listener. You've penalized your listener by having your site be slow. They will penalize you and drop you down on the search engine. So they need some speed. If your competitors got it and you don't, you're going to pay the price for it. You will drop down in the rankings. Is your podcast optimized for mobile devices? Today, most people are listening on mobile devices than anything else right now. That might change, but right now, that's the way it is. By the way, search engine algorithms change all the time, so you must stay on top of the changes almost daily if you want to stay on top of the search engine results. It becomes a job. There are tricks that work today that might not work tomorrow, but we'll talk about some of them that have some consistency and longevity to them today. Even though your podcast is an audio file, what you write about it may be the most important aspect of getting search engines to find it, rank it, and push it to the very top. The name of your podcast, for instance, should have the word in it that someone might search for of the subject matter. For instance, if you're looking of how to do and start a podcast, Studio 21 Podcast Cafe may show up. It has a better chance because it has the word podcast that's in it. That's what you're searching for, that word, and it finds it, so you have a better chance. But Studio 21 Podcast Cafe is the brand, and the search is more likely to take you to an episode. If you're looking for podcast search engine optimization, if I call this episode Search Engine Optimization for My Podcast, then when you Google, how do I get better search engine results on my podcast, this might show up. I might get better results than if I call this episode 21. Don't you think so? Because that's the way it'll work. That's how search engines work. So try to include that, if possible, into the show title. Never mind the title of the show itself. If you've already done that, or you can't change it for any reason, or you can change it to what would be more relevant to help the search engine. But each episode, try to think of it as the Google Analytics, what you can do to help Google find it better, which is going to make it easier for the person looking for it. It'll make it easier and better for them. That's just the title. But the more information you provide to the search engine, the more it's going to like. Your show notes, meta tags, keywords, all play a role in optimizing your podcast. These are snippets of text that describes your show and the episode contents. Be accurate on the tags, because the spiders and robots will punish you if you're not accurate. There's a lot of work that can be done here that can be a big difference to your podcast and make a big difference. Now, I mentioned Google, but there's a lot more. Even though Google is the #1 search engine, there are or may be more important search engines for the podcaster to be concentrating on. I'm going to get to the #2 search engine that might be more important than Google in just 1 minute. But before I do, listen to this.
If you're in the area of Boston North into southern New Hampshire and you're thinking about doing a podcast, there is a place you have to see. It's called Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. Located right over the border into Salem, New Hampshire, Studio 21 Podcast Cafe is a live, working, full-service podcast and vodcast, that's video on demand, studio. All professional equipment, professional producer, and total distribution of your podcast is done for you. Would you like search engine optimization for more people to find your business, or better ranking on Google? Well, Studio 21 Podcast Cafe can do it all for you for far less than you think. Schedule a free 21-minute, no-obligation consultation by going to www.studio21podcast.cafe. That's studio21podcast.cafe. Now, back to the program.
And we're back, and today we're talking about podcast SEO, search engine optimization. You want to grow your podcast, or if you haven't even started one yet, why not start the right way and not waste your time doing a podcast that nobody can find? We all want listeners. It's the key to success of the podcast. Without anyone listening, you actually have nothing. You've heard the You've heard the thought process of, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, if you do a podcast and there's nobody listening, are you doing a podcast? Or are you wasting your time? Stop wasting your time and get people listening. Learn how to do it, or get somebody that can do it for you. We can do it for you here at Studio 21 Cafe, or you can find somebody else to do it, but you need to get it done. And we do it for a lot of people here on Studio 21, and you can find them on the United Podcast Network. It's a network of shows with the work done in the back end of SEO, search engine optimization. Go to the UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv and you'll see all the podcasts that are having that SEO work done for them. Or Google the United Podcast Network and you'll see that it should pop up first. Try searching for podcast networks and see where United Podcast Network shows up. See if we're doing the work. Google is number one out there, but there's lots more. Bing, Yahoo, Ask, just to name a few of them, are other big search engines. There are a lot more. And for the podcaster, there may be some more important ones than Google itself. How about iTunes? Yes, iTunes is a search engine. But just like Google, you must write for iTunes. It has no ears. The key is you must write the show titles, the name of the podcast, the meta tags, the show notes, descriptions. Put these things in here so that the search engine can find you. If the search engine can find you, then the listener can be able to find you. Other places that are not to be overlooked is Stitcher and SoundCloud, and it's the same deal with them. You have to put the words in there so it can end up finding you. All the search engines are good, but the most important one is the last one I'm going to talk about. And I believe it is the best search engine out there for all podcasters. And a big reason why it's so great is because most of your competition doesn't even use it. It's the number 2 search engine of all time and overlooked by most podcasters. Why do they not appear on this platform is beyond me. Maybe they don't realize that this can help them as much as it can. It's a go-to search engine for me and for most of my listeners because my listeners would rather hear it than read it. Yours would too. They listen to podcasts. The number 1 place you need to be for your podcast is YouTube. YouTube is a video platform and the number 2 search engine in America for how-to, to learn, and for information, which is what you're searching for automatically when you're looking for a podcast. But most podcasters are not recording video for the show. Those are only the top research podcasters that are doing this. There's not a lot to see on a podcast. I'm looking at my notes, reading my notes here. Not a lot to see that's going on, but it's here for search engine optimization. It'll help Google find me. It loves video content that's out there. YouTube is the place to end up putting your video content. No, there's not going to be a lot of people that's going to watch the show. It's there for search engine optimization, and it has been the number 1 success for myself having it there. Use it. Videotape yourself doing the podcast. Doesn't matter if people are looking at it. It's there for another reason. It's there for search engine optimization. So to wrap it up, create a memorable podcast name with a searchable word in the title. Title each episode with a searchable title that will answer the searcher's questions. Be sure to tag everything that can help the search engine find your podcast. Don't just think about Google. Don't forget iTunes and YouTube. They may be even more important. And if this is overwhelming to you, you don't have to do it alone. You can visit us here at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, or at the very least, have somebody help you. If you want to talk to me about this or doing a podcast, message me at the Contact Us button at the Studio 21 Podcast.cafe. Set up a meeting with me, let me show you the studio, and I'll even buy you a cup of coffee. Next week, we're going to talk about cross-marketing with your podcast and your business. Marketing, both of them at the same time. So that's my 21 minutes or less, and I'm out of here. You've been listening to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, live from the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe on the United Podcast Network.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.